Alright, so a couple of weeks ago, Alex Pereira just became the ninth two-division slash double champion in the UFC. And, we're definitely seeing a lot of talk about different fighters who want to go on and become double champs. Leon's talking about it, Makhachev's talking about it, even people who aren't champions yet, like, I can't remember the name. He's been talking about becoming a double champ, and he's not even a champ yet. So I thought it would be interesting to go and rank the current UFC double champs. So first, what is the criteria? Well, this is mainly going to be ranked upon the impressiveness of the second belt, not the rest of his or her career, okay? So for someone like George St. Pierre, we're not going to be talking about what he did at welterweight. We're just talking about how impressive was his run at middleweight, and specifically we'll be talking about the second belt as well. And of course, we got to give bonus points to people who were simultaneous double champs, and this is also going to be based on feats, not popularity, and mostly not in my personal opinion, but of course there's naturally always going to be bias. But I think you'll see soon, I think I was fairly objective with this. Alright, so first up, number 9, Jon Jones. Of course, there's a little bit of an asterisk here because he's a current two-division champ, and I think he will probably be able to move up this list if he can get a defense or two, but as is, I think he has to be at the bottom because he hasn't really done anything yet. And so, first up, he doesn't get the points by being a double champ, and he took a long time off to fight for his second belt as well, so he didn't necessarily have that size disadvantage that really makes a double champ simultaneously, or two-division champ, very close together as impressive. And he also had a perfect matchup for himself for the belt against grapple-tarted Gon, so it's really not super impressive of a win for the heavyweight belt either. And he also has 0 defenses and likely going to duck Old Man Tom, though you definitely have to give him some points for longevity, since, his first belt, his light heavyweight belt, he got in 2011, and he got this belt in 2023. That is 12 years between the first and second belt, and that is the longest time between winning your first and second belt of any two-division champ in UFC history, so amazing longevity, shout out for that. Dream matchup for the belt. I just don't know if I can really push you up there until you get a defense or two in. Now, we had number 8, George St. Pierre. Here's why I say I'm not biased. I'm Canadian, so it feels wrong to put George St. Pierre at the bottom of any list, but I think we have to here since A, he wasn't a double champ, two-division champ, and like Jon Jones, took a couple years off, and he also fought a very weak champion in Michael Bisping for his second belt, Would have been a lot more impressive if he was fighting some higher level competition, and like Jones, he also took a long time off to fight for his second belt, but the reason I have him above Jon Jones, even though for both of them, I think they fought weak competition for the belt and took a long time off before getting it and weren't simultaneous champs, Georges St. Pierre already retired without losing the belt, and Jon Jones, you never know. I think you would have to keep him at the bottom of the list if, say, he then fights Tom or Stipe and loses. But if you can get a defense, I think you put him above GSP. But for now, let's get on to number 7. Now, number 7, Little Henry Cejudo. He is actually a true simultaneous double champ, so points for that. But I don't think he was really, specifically for his bantamweight belt, again, fighting that great of competition. And he also doesn't really get longevity points like the last two, since his flyweight belt was in 2018, his second belt, bantamweight, was in 2019, and then he initially retired in 2020. And so, of course, again, beating Demetrius Johnson is stupidly impressive, but we are talking about bantamweight accomplishments since that's his second belt. He won the belt against Marlon Morales, who is since 1-7 and 0-3 in the PFL in his last 3 fights. Though I guess Marlon Morales did ironically actually knock out Aljamain Sterling with a knee early on in Aljo's career, but again, I wouldn't say that's a very impressive win. His first and only defense of his second belt was to Dominic Cruz, who was returning 4 years after his loss to Cody Garbrandt, so obviously it's not prime Dominic Cruz, so it's not as impressive as it could be, because this was his first fight back. I don't think he was quite as washed, so I still think this is a pretty solid defense, though he does definitely diminish his legacy because he tried to come back to fight Aljo to become a 2-time champ at his second belt and lost. And he was also good about not holding divisions up either, which is something we'll definitely have to talk about when it comes to certain double champs who held 2 belts at the same time on this list. He defended each belt once before retiring, so pretty solid, and wasn't holding up divisions. Now, number 6, also an asterisk here, because of course he is a current champ. Now, why do I have him so much above Jon Jones, despite him also having 0 defenses and being a current champ? Well, I think he fought a much harder matchup than Jon Jones. He had to beat Yuri for the belt, who is an absolute killer. And of course, we're really mainly supposed to only be talking about the second belt here, which is Alex Pierre's light heavyweight belt, but I think you have to give some props for being a double champ in 2 different combat sports. I think that's stupid impressive. And right now, again, obviously 0 defenses and likely will defend against Jamal Hill. I think he gets that done. If he gets that done, I do think that probably moves him up this list. Looking at the rest of my list, probably 1 more spot, maybe 2. I guess we'll have to see. Depends how impressive that defense against Jamal Hill is, and if he continues to defend more, retire after, etc., etc. So number 5, we have Amanda Nunes. So true simultaneous double champ, and respect for actually defending both her belts back to back. From what I understand, if I didn't miss out on anything here, she's the only simultaneous double champ to have defended both belts in order. For example, what Henry Cejudo and Daniel Cormier did, Daniel Cormier will get to later on in this list, they won their second belt while still holding their first belt, but never went back and defended that first belt again after winning their second belt, which Amanda Nunes did. Of course, since women's featherweight is a fake division, and I don't think it even exists anymore, it's not necessarily that impressive to have been defending 2 belts at once, but either way. And of course, she also beat Cyborg for her second belt, which on paper is good, but I would kind of come in with the argument that she's been in Bellator ever since the defeat. So how impressive is that really? And again, because she was defending both, she wasn't holding up any divisions, but again, not really much of a division to hold up. And both of her defenses at featherweight, which is what we're talking about here, her second belt, were against fighters who went 3-3 in the UFC and both shortly retired after the title fight. So not really high level competition, but I have to put her higher simply for actually defending both belts. Now we got number 4, of course, the most famous double champ himself, Conor McGregor. Now, why do I have a star beside double champ? It's not that I don't think he would have been a 2-division champ, but I don't think you can really call him a true simultaneous double champ. He won the featherweight belt first, of course, then fought up 2 weight classes and lost, and after winning the belt, he hasn't fought at featherweight since, and likely was never going to make featherweight again after he won the belt. So is it really true simultaneous double champ status if Conor never would have actually been able to fight at featherweight while holding the lightweight belt? Not to mention, he lost his next fight after winning that first featherweight belt at a different weight class before fighting for the lightweight belt. So let's say that loss, of course, to Nate Diaz, was a defense. It would have obviously been an Aldo rematch, which in my opinion, Aldo would have won. Meaning when Conor went to fight Eddie Alvarez, he would have been a 2-division champ, not a true simultaneous double champ. Again, I kind of just had to take some points off, but I still have him above Amanda Nunes and Henry Cejudo because even if he did kind of cheese holding 2 belts at once, technically never got any defenses or anything like that, Eddie Alvarez, not the highest tier champion by any means, but I think still a solid, B tier champ or whatever. I think much more impressive than Amanda Nunes's and Henry Cejudo's wins for their second simultaneous belt. And of course, he does also diminish his legacy a little bit by losing to Khabib, trying to become a 2-time lightweight champion. Now on to number 3, we got the big man himself, Daniel Cormier. So again, simultaneous double champ, and I think he probably actually had the highest competition for his second belt of any double champ. If you haven't noticed the trend so far, but really other than Alex Pereira, a lot of these guys weren't really fighting super difficult matchups when it came to getting their second belt. Daniel Cormier, of course, beating Prime Stipe for his second belt is super impressive, and again, I think that's the toughest fight anyone's ever probably had when it's come to getting their second belt. And his only defense at his second belt heavyweight was against Derek Lewis, which was a dream matchup for DC to be fair, and then he lost the belt to Stipe, and then lost again to Stipe in the rematch before retiring, so again, a little bit of points off there, but again, I think you still have to put him at number 3 on the list. So that kind of shows you the weakness of becoming a double champ and kind of how unimpressive a lot of these double champs were with their second belt. When Daniel Cormier, with 1 defense and 2 losses when it comes to his second weight class, is number 3 on the list. That kind of shows you a lot of people really just try and become double champ so that they can say they were double champ and retire rather than try and defend their belt for a long time. And again, I think that's why we're seeing a lot of people want to be double champ right now. They'll just quickly, I get the welterweight belt, then the middleweight belt, and I'll just retire and not worry about it. That makes me having a better legacy than if I defended the belt 2 or 3 times, which, kind of does happen, even though when you look into it like this, that second belt is often not actually that impressive. Well, I shouldn't actually say, it's not impressive. Winning any UFC belts, of course, impressive, but, relative terms here. Now, number 2 and number 1. If you know the list of all 9 double champions, now that I've revealed number 2, you're going to know who number 1 is, but number 2, we got Randy Couture. I promise, I'm not some ancient old head here, but just hear me out. First up, he's the only 2-division multi-champ. What do I mean by that? Every person here only held each belt once or twice, or specifically with their second belt, they only ever held it once. So that means Randy Couture is the only champ to become champ in multiple weight classes, multiple times. And you got to give points for longevity as well, considering his first belt was the heavyweight belt in 1997, and then he lost his heavyweight belt again for the last time because he fought light heavyweight in between those in 2008. 11 years after winning his first belt, so that's pretty solid here. But again, the reason I think you can't put him at 1 is it's not as high level competition. So for a second belt, for his light heavyweight belt, he beat Prime Tito Ortiz, who, let's be honest, was of course a big star, not really the most top tier fighter in the world, or greatest light heavyweight champion by any means. And despite becoming champ 5 different times plus 1 interim, he only has 3 title defenses. Lil bro thinks he's Brandon Moreno or something because he just really struggled to defend a belt, so I gotta knock points off for that. Now, on to number 1, another old head pick. Number 1, I think you gotta put BJ Penn. Because when we look at 2-division champ, first up, he was a welterweight champion in 2004, beating out Matt Hughes, and then he won his second belt, which is the lightweight belt, in 2008. He beat Joe Stevenson. His 3 defenses were all against strong competition, and 3 defenses at lightweight actually ties with Khabib for the record, before he then lost the belt to Frankie Edgar, lost Frankie Edgar in the rematch, moved up to welterweight, and then went on his pretty bad loss streak. I'm sure we all know that by now. Here's why I have him at number 1, because we're only talking about their second belt, and for BJ Penn, that second belt was at lightweight. Most of the time he was faltering was at welterweight, and so that doesn't actually diminish the legacy of his second belt, so it allows him to stay at number 1. And again, strong competition. His first defense was against Sean Strickland, who was a 36-4 record, and then he defended against Kenny Florian, who's considered one of the best fighters to never win a belt, and then Diego Sanchez, who was the winner of The Ultimate Fighter 1 alongside Forrest Griffin, has the most defenses of his second belt of any 2-division champion. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.